Standing is common sense for a daughter-in-law. I had been preparing food and welcoming guests since the morning at a family gathering. Being 9 months pregnant, I was taking a short break on the sofa in the back. When my mother-in-law, Susan, found me sitting, her expression changed drastically as she approached me and snapped those words. "Susan, I'm sorry. I'm just having some discomfort in my stomach." Unable to stand due to the pain, I apologized while remaining seated on the sofa. As I struggled to get up, Susan, seeming to give up, turned to leave but then shockingly kicked my stomach. "Susan, how could you?" I immediately curled up to protect my stomach, and fortunately, I didn't feel much pain. "It's your useless body that's the problem." This was a line I was all too familiar with after always being oppressed, but I was left speechless by the shock of being kicked in the stomach. Someone, who had been silently watching this scene, waited until Susan was seated, and then. "My name is Anne. I'm a 32-year-old housewife. I live happily with my husband Tom and our 3-year-old son. I am currently 9 months pregnant with our second child. Before the pregnancy was confirmed, it was decided that Tom would be transferred to work abroad alone. Although Tom insisted on staying in America, I didn't want him to give up his dream of working overseas, a goal since our dating days. After I encouraged him to the end, he promised to go abroad for just 3 years, and then he left. While I felt joy in supporting my husband's dream, there was one concern. The insidious harassment from Susan and Mike, my father-in-law. While Tom was around, they adored us, but in his absence, they subjected me to daily verbal abuse. Since Susan and Mike were kind in front of Tom, I always tried to bring him along. But for the next 3 years, I'll have to endure their malicious harassment alone, which is disheartening. However, I couldn't discuss it with Tom, knowing it would only add to his worries and considering Susan's feelings towards her son. Initially, I tried to please them by complying with everything, but no matter what, I only faced their resentment. All I want is to get along with Mike and Susan. Desiring a peaceful relationship with Susan and Mike, one day, I finally broke down and decided to be submissive. Then I heard shocking words from them. "You stole our precious son from us." That's what Susan declared. "Ever since you married our son, he hardly pays any attention to us." I finally understood the root of their relentless harassment. Susan and Mike were so overly fond of their son that they were jealous of me, his wife. "If that's the case, I can always come with him." Startled by Susan's unexpected confession, I tried to find a solution and offered various suggestions. "The best thing would be for you to leave our son alone." "Right. Then he might return his love to us." I was stunned by Susan's wish. The thought of them wanting a divorce because they felt their son's affection for them had diminished gave me chills. And this distorted expression of their love even scared me. "Don't you like the idea of your son building a new family?" I asked tentatively. "New family? That's ridiculous. Our family is enough. No matter how old our son gets." Realizing the extraordinary love they had for their only son, my husband, I was speechless. "I love my husband. I want to get along with you and Susan, but I have no intention of leaving him." Normally quiet, this was one point I could not concede. Seeing my resolve, Susan scoffed and retorted. "Are you so confident that no matter how we treat you, you won't leave?" From that day on, their harassment only intensified instead of diminishing. At one point, knowing I was allergic to shrimp, they sneakily added it to the fried food. I was about to eat it when my husband, who always harped on about my allergy, noticed and warned me. "Shrimp? I'm sorry. Actually, this was a gift. I forgot you can't have shrimp." Susan apologized to me repeatedly, making excuses. My husband seemed satisfied and asked her to be more careful in the future. But even as they spoke, Susan was stepping on my foot under the table. Amidst such harassment, we were leading a peaceful life when my husband's transfer overseas was confirmed. Susan and the others turned pale with shock as I celebrated. "Overseas. That's going to be hard on the child and Anne, right?" My father-in-law, Mike, really just not wanting to be separated from them, used me as an excuse. My husband said it was a decision we made together, and I knew the anger would soon be directed at me. And, did you even consider my grandchild's feelings? Unsatisfied with my decision, Susan interrogated me like it was an inquisition. Fed up, my husband finally spoke out. Both of you, enough. Working abroad has always been my dream. And is just supporting me in that. He immediately defended me. We support you too. But now just isn't the right time, is it? Mike seemed a bit sorry, yet unable to agree. That's right. The grandchild is only 3 years old. It's too much for Anne. Susan, for once, seemed to be on my side, using my name in her argument. I'm fine. Tom and I have discussed it and decided to go for it. I spoke up, my voice trembling slightly, trying to act bravely so my husband wouldn't worry. Realizing our determination, Susan and Mike reluctantly accepted it, though with a sense of defeat. That night, feeling sorry towards Susan and Mike, my husband suggested we all have dinner together. I had been avoiding eating with them since the shrimp allergy incident, but I decided to endure it for my husband's sake. Then let us, the ladies, get busy preparing in the kitchen. You relax. Susan, excited to cook for her son after a long time, went into the kitchen. Hesitant to be alone with her, I steeled myself and followed her to the kitchen. Aren't you afraid our son might leave you when he returns from abroad? Susan's words, still hoping for our breakup, drained the blood from my face. Realizing it was pointless to engage, I silently started preparing. While we were working on different ingredients, Susan called out to me. And, that pot over there is cool. Could you take it to the table? Busy with preparations, I followed Susan's instructions and grabbed the pot handle with my bare hands, only to let go immediately from the scorching heat. A pot of steaming hot beef stew fell right at my feet. I burned my hands and feet. Hearing my scream, my husband and Susan rushed over. And, did you touch it with your bare hands? I told you to be careful of burns. What should we do now? Susan pretended to panic, but did nothing. My husband, seeing this, quickly instructed to bring a towel and ice. He also told Mike to call an ambulance. Seeing my red, swollen hands and feet, I could only cry in pain and frustration, clinging to my husband. Thanks to his quick thinking, I received proper treatment at the hospital and was told it would take 2 weeks to heal. Slowly, my spirit was breaking from Susan's escalating insidious bullying. As time passed and my husband's departure overseas approached, I made sure to avoid Susan and the others completely. Despite their vengeful attempts to visit our home or call multiple times a day, I never responded. For their excuses to see their grandchild, I sent pictures with messages. To my husband, I told him the reason for not seeing Susan was because of severe pregnancy symptoms, which he understood. Half a year passed, and the annual family gathering, highly valued by my husband's family, drew near. Knowing its importance, and though my husband said I didn't have to attend, I decided to go. I informed Susan of my attendance in advance through a message. Her reply, seemingly eager to finally vent her frustrations on me, brought back the flashbacks of my burn injury accident and filled me with more fear. Then, the day arrived when everyone was to gather. I briefly greeted Susan and Mike, then spent most of my time with relatives of my age, keeping my distance. Standing is common sense for a daughter-in-law. I had been preparing meals and welcoming guests since the morning at the family gathering. Being 9 months pregnant, I took a rest on a sofa in the back. When Susan saw me sitting, she changed her expression and came over to me, throwing those words at me. Susan, I'm sorry. I'm just having some discomfort in my stomach. Unable to stand due to the pain, I apologized but couldn't get up from the sofa. Seeing that I couldn't stand, Susan, seeming to give up, turned to leave, but then shockingly, she turned back and kicked my stomach. Susan, how could you? I immediately curled up to protect my stomach, and luckily, the pain was minimal. It's your useless body that's at fault. I was used to being oppressed by her, but I was left speechless and shocked by being kicked. Someone, who had been silently watching this scene, waited until Susan was seated, and then,
"Mom, what did you just do to Anne on the sofa?"
someone shouted loudly, making everyone, including me, turn towards the voice. There stood my husband, who was supposed to be overseas for work.
"Tom."
Susan uttered his name in a trembling voice. Painfully, I stood up from the sofa and slowly moved towards my husband.
"What did you do to Anne just now?"
he asked Susan, with an expression I had never seen before.
"Tom, why are you here?"
Until the previous day, my husband had apologized over the phone, saying he couldn't get a long leave and wouldn't be able to attend. I couldn't ask him to accompany me, knowing he had just been transferred overseas. Anne. I came back to surprise everyone. Tom's face softened as he looked at me, his expression changing completely from before. He rushed over to me, hugged me around my shoulders, and supported me.
"But when I came back, I happened to see Mom and you having that interaction from the entrance."
He had been frozen for a while, not understanding the situation as he had never seen Susan like that before.
"I was about to ask, and what happened when Mom kicked her?"
Hearing this, I realized he had witnessed Susan kicking my stomach. Looking up at my husband, I could see the anger in his eyes.
"Tom, this is..."
Relatives started gathering in the room, sensing the unusual tension, making the situation even more strained.
"Tom, everyone is here, let's talk in the other room."
Susan tried to calm my husband with a quiet voice, attempting to defuse the situation.
"And you don't need to say anything. I want to hear it directly from Mom."
Saying this, my husband turned his face towards Susan again.
"No, let's hear it here, in front of everyone."
The relatives, stunned by my husband's raised voice, watched the unfolding situation in silence. The commotion got Mike and Mike's brother's attention, who had organized the family gathering.
"What's all this commotion about?"
Seeing the unusual situation, Mike hurried to Susan's side. Upon realizing his beloved son was there in front of him, Mike looked even more shocked.
"Dad, it's been a while. I didn't want our reunion to be like this, but I just saw something unbelievable."
With Mike's presence, my husband regained some composure and continued in a calm voice.
"What happened?"
Mike looked slightly uneasy. He already knew Susan had done something to me. Having always turned a blind eye to Susan's bullying, he was part of it too.
"It was just, and I were talking."
Susan stubbornly refused to admit she had kicked me, trying to get out of this situation. However, my husband quietly glared at her, wanting her to confess. Sensing the conversation wasn't progressing, I finally spoke up.
"You kicked me in the stomach, didn't you?"
I finally revealed in front of everyone that Susan had kicked my stomach. Hearing this, the relatives began murmuring.
"And what an accusation! I would never do such a thing."
Susan shouted, flustered.
"Never, what, Mom? I saw it with my own eyes."
My husband expressed his frustration and anger at Susan's denial and her true nature. As he seemed about to confront Susan, I urged him desperately to stay calm.
"Tom, are you sure it wasn't a misunderstanding? Susan doing such a thing."
Mike continued to defend Susan until the end. Hearing this, my husband's suspicion only deepened.
"Dad, even now, you're siding with Mom?"
My husband was speechless at Mike's attitude, seemingly more afraid of Susan facing critical judgment than the fact she had kicked me.
"Tom."
I could only hold his hand tightly. The ease with which his parents dismissed their daughter-in-law raised my husband's suspicions, bringing up a question in his mind.
"Anne, this isn't the first time, is it?"
My husband's intuition seemed to pick up on something from Susan's behavior. Trying not to worry him, I felt both frustrated and relieved that my strongest ally had finally appeared, bringing tears to my eyes. Realizing this wasn't the first incident, my husband asked,
"Mom, what terrible things have you done to Anne?"
his anger not subsiding but intensifying. The relatives intervened to stop Tom as he approached Susan and Mike.
"Tell everyone here what pain you've caused, Anne."
As Susan heard this, her face turned pale. and she collapsed to the ground.
Tom, it's too harsh to treat Susan like this in her condition.
Mike began to show anger towards Tom.
Harsh? Then what about that burn?
Susan and I were shocked, as if our thoughts had paused for a moment. And the one who raised his voice upon hearing this was, surprisingly, Mike's brother.
And was burned?
Mike's brother, who had been quietly observing what he thought was a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law issue, spoke up for the first time, surprised by the unexpected development.
It seemed strange to me that day, and got a severe burn holding a pot of just done beef stew with her bare hands.
My husband had been troubled by the fact that I had done something I would never normally do.
And would always check if it's safe before handling a pot with her bare hands if it were her own decision.
I always had a habit of double-checking everything. Whether it was cooking or leaving the house, which my husband knew well. So, it seemed odd to him that I would grab the pot without thinking.
The beef stew was made by Mom. Did she say something at that time?
As he pressed for answers, Susan and Mike fell silent. Some relatives defended Susan, while others expressed disbelief. I decided to reveal everything.
That time, Susan said it was cool, right?
I repeated Susan's words with courage. I explained how I was busy with my own cooking preparations that day and took Susan's words at face value without checking the pot.
I regret not verifying and ended up getting burned.
I admitted my mistake. Hearing this, Susan's expression changed, and she glared at me, shouting,
"You are just trying to slander us. What kind of daughter-in-law are you?"
Susan, who had been subdued, became enraged when faced with me.
I'm not stupid. I have saved our interactions as evidence.
I had secretly been collecting evidence of Susan and Mike's insidious harassment, in case I couldn't endure it any longer. My husband showed a surprised expression, then I said,
"Tom, I'm sorry I kept quiet. I didn't want to worry you, and I was afraid of ruining your relationship with Susan and Mike."
The root of his parents' harassment stemmed from their affection for their beloved son. It was a twisted love, but I wanted to avoid worsening the relationship between Tom, who had been raised with much love from his parents. Susan and Mike, not expecting that I had been considerate of them, turned pale upon hearing this.
"Mom, Dad, did you hear? Even after all this, and was still thinking of us."
Tom apologized to me, ashamed that he hadn't realized the situation.
"And I'm so sorry my parents made you suffer this much."
Tom apologized with tears, and Susan, as if regretting how things turned out, exclaimed,
"No, it's wrong. It's her fault. She stole our precious son."
It was the moment Susan's true nature was revealed. The relatives around us looked on with cold eyes. Even Mike, considering his brother's reputation, tried to stop Susan's outburst.
"Who stole me from you? Are you doing all this too and because of me?"
My husband was speechless. Not expecting such a distorted form of love where Susan's harassment was a retaliation for his affection being directed towards his new family.
"I'm grateful for how you raised me. But the most important thing to me now is and our family."
He expressed his feelings to Susan and Mike. He then shared how much respect and consideration we had always shown towards Susan and her family.
"Mom, Dad, I wanted you to see the irreplaceable love of your grandchildren and Anne's admiration for you."
Moved by their son's desperate plea, Susan and Mike seemed to finally realize the gravity of the situation, and Mike collapsed on the spot.
"Mom and Dad, you've destroyed your own daughter-in-law's love and my trust with your own hands."
Hearing this, Susan, realizing for the first time that she had disappointed her precious son, broke down in tears. Seeing Susan crying and distraught, a part of me felt sorry for her outburst. But more so, I felt a sense of relief in her taking responsibility for this mess. Mike's brother, changing the dire atmosphere, intervened.
"All right, this isn't a spectacle. The four of you, please move to a quieter room."
With those words, the other relatives awkwardly dispersed. Receiving words of sympathy and encouragement, I began to relax a bit. Supported by my husband's arm, We moved to a quieter room as Mike's brother suggested. Once the four of us were inside, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. My husband still had questions for them, eagerly wanting to confront them. However, Susan and Mike looked so exhausted that he hesitated to speak. Then, Mike's brother entered the room.
Now we can have a calm discussion. Is it true that and was subjected to insidious bullying?
With a stern expression, Mike's brother asked directly. After a moment of contemplation, Mike finally nodded in resignation. Triggered by Mike's acknowledgement, my husband burst out.
To think my parents would do this while and was protecting our child and unborn baby, it's shameful.
He voiced all the accusations as if speaking on my behalf. He revealed that the shrimp allergy, the burn, and the kicking were all acts of spite towards me.
I can't understand how Dad and Mom could hurt and to such an extent.
Disappointed beyond imagination, my husband's disillusionment deepened. Then, Mike's brother brought an end to the discussion.
Tom, that's enough. As your uncle, I'm deeply sorry for such a shameful sibling. I can't forgive what they've done.
He apologized to us, then rushed to Mike and struck him on the cheek.
As your brother, I cannot forgive your actions. Don't show your face at family events anymore.
He then instructed Susan and Mike to leave immediately. Susan and Mike seemed to want to say something to me, but the fact that they had kicked me remained unchanged. I ignored their expressions and stayed close to my husband's side. Once Susan and Mike were out of sight, I finally felt a sense of closure and, perhaps relieved, I broke down crying. I don't remember much about what happened next, but my husband stayed by my side until the end. After the revelation of Susan's insidious bullying, my husband forbade any contact or visits from them. This helped me avoid seeing Susan, and gradually, my emotional wounds began to heal. The overseas transfer that was supposed to last 3 years was cut short by my husband, who didn't want to be away any longer. He returned to America after just 1 year. Initially, I was a bit apprehensive, but I supported his return, prioritizing the safe birth of our second child. Now, we are eagerly awaiting the birth of our second child as a family of 3. Susan still sends daily messages of apology, wanting to mend our relationship. When I express my fear of seeing them, my husband continues to prioritize my feelings. The relatives also talk about how haggard Susan looks now. And the general consensus is that it's their own fault. In a situation where my husband and relatives are on my side, there's not much Susan and Mike can do. So, once our second child is born, I plan to show them the baby. However, I have no intention of repairing the relationship with Susan and Mike. I'm resolved to spend an ordinary life with our family of 4, combining our strengths.
Finally back, huh? I bet you just got tired of being here and ran back to your parents' place, crying for mommy and daddy to save you. Hey, forget about the loser and let's continue where we left off. Despicable. I wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding. Despite everything, a part of me might have still held on to some faith in them. Yet, the scene before my eyes left no room for such hopes. Rage began to bubble up inside me. What are you even doing here? Get lost, will you? Seriously. Stop bothering us, okay? All this time, because of these people. You know what, it's earlier than I planned, but I can't take this anymore. It's time to show them hell. I'm divorcing you. At the mention of my divorce, Brent and Julia burst into laughter. Then they hurled this at me. Get out already. And make sure you clean the whole house before you leave. Got it? Clean the whole house, huh? Fine by me. I'll clean it so thoroughly, just as you wish. My name is Sissy, and I've been a housewife for 3 years now. I met Brent, who would later become my husband, at a drinking party hosted by an acquaintance 6 years ago. After dating for 3 years, we got married. Before meeting Brent, I thought marriage was nothing but a distant dream for me. It was all work, no play for me. I was living a life like a grumpy old man straight out of a comic book, stubbornly single. And so why did someone like me get married?
Life is full of surprises. Brent might have been a bit meticulous, but his ability to treat everyone equally without prejudice was what I found so attractive about him. What stood out to me was definitely that first drinking party where we met. He listened to everyone's stories with a smile, without showing a hint of displeasure, and was always kind to the staff. How could I not fall for him after seeing that? "You are very kind," that was how it all started. Before I knew it, my relationship with Brent deepened. When I introduced Brent to my parents, they liked him so much that they often said, "Such a good man is hard to find, you better marry him before it's too late." And so, we finally got married. We became a happily married couple. Brent was different from me, bright, kind, and a great cook. I thought there couldn't be a more perfect husband. I had been feeling this way, until recently. In our 3rd year of marriage, Brent's true nature was finally exposed. If he came home from work and dinner wasn't ready, he would erupt in fury and unleash a torrent of abuse. If the shower wasn't ready, he would be just as angry. And then came the inevitable barrage of insults. As if dealing with this wasn't exhausting enough, Brent's obsessive nature meant that unless the house was constantly spotless, he would become irritable and lash out with more verbal abuse. This became a tremendous source of stress. Therefore, daily house cleaning became an essential chore. Naturally, this alone could consume an entire day, and in addition, I had to manage grocery shopping and laundry by myself. Just a slight lapse in these tasks would dramatically worsen Brent's mood, transforming his behavior towards me completely. The thought of enduring this day in and day out left me with nothing but a deep sigh. Then, one day, Brent came home from work and immediately yelled, "Hey," from the entrance. Rushing to see what was the matter, I found Brent standing there, shoes still on, wearing an expression of anger.
"What's wrong?"
Then Brent, with a face like a demon, slowly turned towards me, glaring sharply.
"How many times do I have to tell you? Don't leave even a speck of dust, and always keep the shoes lined up. Can't you do even that? How many years have you been a housewife? It's about time you get it together."
Brent's usual verbal abuse felt inevitable. Maybe before, I could have tolerated it as just another day. But today, for some reason, I couldn't hold back. I knew arguing back would only make things worse. But even so, I wanted to say them. "I'm sorry. I understand you're under a lot of stress at work. But do you realize how hard it is for me too? I'm the one who cleans every corner of the house every day, does the laundry, takes out the trash, does the shopping, and cooks all by herself. And you can't tolerate even the smallest mistake. I'm not your housekeeper or your mother. If you're going to complain that much, at least help out a little." All the accumulated frustrations, I let it all out. I wanted him to understand, even just a little, how hard it was for me. I wanted him to help, even just a bit. That was all, just that. But the response I got from Brent was utterly disheartening.
"What did you marry me for? Were you just in a hurry because you were almost 30 and didn't want to be left on the shelf? Desperately looking for a man? I saved you from that, so instead of complaining, just do what you're supposed to. If you can't even do that, don't make a fuss."
His words tore my heart to shreds. I was shocked. Where had the kind Brent I first met gone? Does marriage really change people that much? Yet, contrary to how I felt, Brent looked at me with a face filled with delight, like a demon. A week has passed since that nightmare. I've naturally started avoiding Brent. Every word he says terrifies me. Every time Brent speaks, my body stiffens and shakes with fear. All due to the terror Brent instilled in me. To an outsider, we might look like a king and his slave. The fear was overwhelming. And my weight dropped rapidly, day by day. It was like living through hell. But Brent couldn't care less. One day, Brent came home from work with a woman by his side. "This is Julia, the boss's daughter. She's out of your league no matter how hard you try. She's an important client, so make sure you don't offend her. If you disrespect her, you know what will happen. Brent said this with a mix of sarcasm and intimidation. Then Julia, upon hearing this, looked at me and said with a mocking smile,
"Wow, this is your place. Bigger than I expected. But I hate even a speck of dust in such places. You should have hired a younger, more capable housekeeper instead of this useless old lady. If you agree, I can introduce you to a good housekeeper."
Despite meeting me for the first time, she looked down on me right away. And Brent, standing behind her, looked at me with disdain and laughed.
"Julia, technically she is my wife, you know."
"What?
"Really? I had no idea. I mean, she's not cute or fashionable like me, so I just assumed she was the housekeeper."
"Well, of course. No one can go up against you." The two of them mocked me without a care. Tears welled up in my eyes from the humiliation. Then, Brent demanded that I prepare a meal to entertain Julia.
"That's fine, but can you actually cook, ma'am? You give off a strong vibe of not being able to cook."
"I've taught her the basics of cooking, so she should be fine. Though, I'm better in the kitchen, so you'll have to cut her some slack if it's not up to par."
"I'm sorry, I can't do that. I'm brutally honest, so she's going to end up crying." All right. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it."
Despite being insulted like this, was I really expected to cook for them? If only I could refuse. But if I did, then...
"Hey, don't just stand there. Get to it."
Brent rushed me to start cooking. With mixed feelings, I began preparing the meal and served it to them. However, they didn't touch the food at all, just continued their conversation. An hour later, as Julia was getting ready to leave, she said to me,
"No wonder Brent's losing patience with you. You can throw this food in the trash."
With a triumphant look, Julia left the house with Brent. I was left alone in the house, standing there in a daze. From then on, Brent started doing things with Julia more often, and her visits to our house increased. Even when I returned from shopping, Brent was already home. Of course, Julia was there by his side.
"Welcome back. You look surprised."
"Don't shock her too much.
Don't want her having a heart attack." "Yeah, you're right. Sorry, ma'am."
Julia, uninvited, would come to our house just to make snide remarks. And Brent, joining in, would mock me as well. Fed up with their disrespectful treatment, I found myself walking out of the house before I knew it.
I can't stand this life anymore.
I sat on a bench in a small park nearby, crying. I wonder how much time had passed. It was already dark around me. That's when my mobile phone rang. It was a call from my dad. His call at that moment felt like a lifeline. I answered the phone immediately, asking him to come pick me up with just a few words. My dad replied with a simple "understood." About an hour later, my dad arrived to pick me up.
"Let's go home."
During the car ride to my parents' house, my dad didn't ask a thing. Perhaps he didn't need to ask, he might have already known what had happened. We arrived at my parents' house without exchanging a single word. As I got out of the car, my mom, as if she had been waiting for my return, came rushing over.
"Welcome back. Let's go inside."
Her casual words made tears spill over.
When did I become so weak? I don't need to ask anything. But I do want to do whatever I can to help my daughter who is suffering. That's what parents are for.
These words from my dad became the catalyst for me to pour out everything that had been building up inside me. About my marriage, Brent's actions and attitude, and also about Julia. Crying in front of my parents as I spoke, they embraced me gently. My mom said I had done well, and my dad told me it was okay to be honest with my feelings. Their words solidified my resolve. From that day on, while staying at my parents' house, I started making certain preparations. Of course, during this time, Brent called me numerous times, but I ignored all of them. Answering would only result in sarcasm or abuse. It was better to focus on what needed to be done instead of answering his calls. A week into making preparations, I received a text from Brent saying we needed to talk and that I should come over. I guess I have no choice but to go. There were still things to be done, but I couldn't ignore him any longer. Reluctantly, I decided to return home. It had been 2 weeks since I had ran out. I wondered where Brent was and headed to the living room, but he wasn't there. Thinking he might still be at work, I then heard Brent and Julia enjoying themselves from the bedroom upstairs. I rushed upstairs and forcefully opened the bedroom door, finding them in the midst of their affair, as I had suspected. It seemed they had called me back just to show me this scene on purpose.
Finally back, huh? I bet you just got tired of being here and ran back to your parents' place, crying for mommy and daddy to save you. Hey, forget about the loser and let's continue where we left off. Despicable. I wanted to believe I would never do such a thing. Maybe part of me still held on to some belief even after everything that happened. But the scene before my eyes didn't allow for even a shred of that hope. Anger was boiling up inside me. What are you even doing here? Get lost, will you? Seriously. Stop bothering us, okay? All this time, because of these people. You know what, it's earlier than I planned, but I can't take this anymore. It's time to show them hell. I'm divorcing you. At the word divorce, Brent and Julia burst into laughter. Then they hurled this at me. Get out already. And make sure you clean the whole house before you leave. Got it? Clean the whole house, huh? Fine by me. Just as you wish, I'll clean it thoroughly. All right, I'll clean up. But I wouldn't want to interrupt your fun, so I'll do it later. Wow, aren't you considerate? Make sure you keep your word, all right? And you're the one preparing the divorce papers. I nodded with a smile at Brent's words and left. Immediately after stepping out of the house, I made a call to a certain place. Yes, everything is going as planned. Yes, thank you very much. Leaving the house I had lived in behind, I went straight back to my parents' house. Upon my arrival, I simply said, I did it, and my parents told me I had done well. 2 weeks later, Brent called. Hello? Don't hello me! What the hell did you do? What do you mean? I haven't done anything. Don't play dumb. Why is my house gone when we came back from the trip? You did this, didn't you? Exactly. Of course, it was all my doing. After our conversation, Brent and Julia had leisurely gone on an overseas trip. Before their return, I executed a plan I had been concocting by contacting a real estate agency. That's why the house was gone. Well, you told me to clean it up, so I just sold the house. It's completely cleared out now, isn't it? The neighbors are even happy about the improved view. What? That's not what I meant. I said clean it, not sell the damn house. Oh, was that so? I thought making it clean meant selling the house itself. My bad. Brent ranted over the phone, though it was understandable. To return from a trip with your mistress and find your house suddenly gone, turned into an empty lot. You keep saying stuff, but isn't it obvious? We're getting divorced, so I had to take care of things, right? Plus, I built that house, and it's in my name, right? So, it's up to me to decide what to do with my own property. Did you really live there without understanding that? You can't be that stupid. But, that's... You didn't have to sell the entire house? Is that what you do to a husband you loved? That's going too far. What? Loved? Don't make me laugh. If there was love, we wouldn't be getting divorced. Of course, there was love at first. But you ruined it all. The abuse, the sarcasm, the exploitation, and to top it off, infidelity. How much more did you think you could disrespect me? And you talk about love? Silenced by my outburst, Brent had nothing more to say. But that wasn't enough to calm my anger. Considering everything he had done, it wasn't enough. You've suddenly gone quiet. If you're at a disadvantage, you just shut up? Isn't that cowardly? Plus, if you're going to be with the boss's daughter, you didn't need the house anyway, right? When did I ever say I was going to be with Julia? Marrying a woman like her would bankrupt my life, oh crap.
He finally slipped his mouth. I had known all along, Julia was nothing more than a fling for Brent. And there lay Brent's reluctance to lose the house. He wanted to keep his place, enjoy his time with his cute mistress, and have a convenient wife who obeyed everything he said. A perfect life for Brent. Precisely because he didn't want to lose it all, Brent was in a panic over the house being gone.
Well, life doesn't work out that easily. You get into trouble when you give in to desires and get involved with another woman.
But that's...
Sure, the cute boss's daughter might be irresistible to some men. But you should really have a good judge of character. Otherwise, you'll end up in trouble. Think of this as a lesson from your own immaturity and reflect on it. What's that supposed to mean?
Who knows? You're an adult, figure it out.
Well, if you come to my parents' house, I might tell you.
If you have the guts, that is. And with that, I hung up. The next day, to my surprise, Brent came to my parents' house.
I never thought you'd actually show up. I came. Now tell me what you meant by yesterday.
How could he demand answers in such a situation?
Well, if you come at me with that attitude, I'm not inclined to explain.
Don't you think if you want to know, you should show some decency?
I mean, I don't have to tell you.
It's your problem, after all. Brent made a displeased face.
So what will it be? Please tell me.
Despite his reluctance, Brent begrudgingly asked. Come in. I led Brent into the living room. The moment he opened the door to the living room, Brent's face showed shock. There, sitting on the sofa and glaring at Brent with piercing eyes, were my parents. Brent couldn't bear their gaze and looked away.
You knew this would happen, yet you still came.
He didn't respond to my comment, just stood there sweating profusely. Then, my father spoke to Brent.
Don't just stand there, come sit down. It's been a while, let's have a proper talk.
Brent seemed scared by my father's deep, intimidating voice, looking down and unable to lift his face. That's when my mother quickly spoke up.
I'll be honest with you, I will never forgive you. After all the suffering you've caused Sissy, and then to cheat on her as well. Don't think you can walk away free from here.
My father as well as my mother both have strong presence. Even as their daughter, their aura was quite formidable. So, for someone like Brent, who's an outsider, it must be almost unbearable.
If only you hadn't cheated in the first place.
You're so stupid. Though, this would have happened either way. No, that's...
You've put me through a lot. I even lost weight without needing to diet. How did it feel, watching your wife get thinner? I still remember your face from back then. That devilish smile.
Brent was left speechless. Meanwhile, my parents' expressions grew even more stern. Any parent would be furious knowing how much their child had suffered. Even I think so, without even having kids. Suddenly, Brent blurted out.
Is it all my fault?
My parents were taken aback by his words.
Is everything blamed on me? It's not just me. You bastard.
My father, reaching his limit, was about to hit Brent.
Father, wait.
My intervention stopped my father's fist just inches from Brent's face.
There's no need for you to dirty your hands, Dad. Everything has been prepared, don't worry.
Prepared?
It's about time.
At that moment, my mobile phone rang. Yes. Oh, yes. The door is unlocked, so you can come in. Thank you. Brent, unsure of what was to come, looked anxious. Then the living room door opened, and an elderly man, followed by a familiar-looking woman, entered. Seeing them, Brent turned pale and began to tremble.
Sissy, who are these people?
This man is Rocky, the president of the company where Brent works, and the woman hiding behind him is his daughter, Julia, Brent's affair partner. At the word affair partner, my parents' faces turned even more furious. Rocky then greeted my parents and bowed deeply in apology. Nice to meet you. My name is Rocky. I apologize for any trouble my foolish daughter has caused you. Then pulled Julia forward, insisting she apologize as well. Julia! Apologize now. What you've done is despicable. Apologize sincerely. I'm sorry. Her apology was far from sincere. She probably believes she had done nothing wrong. Truly, she was an unbelievable woman. Rocky, angered by Julia's attitude, grabbed her by the collar, about to slap her across the face. Why am I the bad one here? It all started because Brent hit on me. Rocky sighed, lowered his raised arm, and glared sharply at Brent. My daughter is one thing, but you, I had high hopes for. It's truly disappointing to see things turn out this way. Now, we need to discuss your future, both as your boss and as a father. Be prepared. Brent collapsed weakly to the ground. Then, seizing the moment, I made a further attack. I know it's tough right now, but you need to sign this immediately. We can't proceed with the divorce without submitting this divorce application. As for the compensation, my lawyer will contact you later. It's over now. I glanced sideways to see Rocky deeply apologizing to me. Seeing this, Julia, with a look of fury, confronted Rocky. Dad! Why are you apologizing to this woman? Stop it, it's embarrassing. Yet Rocky remained still, continuing to apologize to me without flinching. Dad! Silence. Sissy, I truly apologize. I had no idea my daughter could do something like this. Without you giving me this, I would have never known. Saying this, Rocky took a brown envelope from his inner pocket. He then laid about 10 photos from inside it on the table. These photos showed Julia engaging in affairs with various men within the company. What? Did you think I wouldn't do anything? I'm not that kind-hearted. This is her true nature, do you understand? What? From today onwards, I'm severing our parent-child relationship. We have witnesses here. In front of us, Rocky declared the severance, and Julia cried bitterly till the end. I heard rumors later that Julia was disowned and kicked out of the house immediately. Having lived a comfortable life as the president's daughter, she didn't know how to work and ended up wandering the streets, spending nights in desolate parks. As for Brent, right after this incident, he was demoted from a manager to a regular employee but quit the next day due to the judgment of those around him. A few days later, he was contacted by a lawyer I hired, demanding a substantial compensation payment, and now he works tirelessly day and night to pay it off. Meanwhile, I decided to continue living with my parents. Life with them is comfortable every day. My mother does all the cleaning, laundry, and cooking. It's such a luxurious lifestyle. It makes me wonder if it's even okay to have it this good. I won't live like that ever again. And soon, I plan to look for a new job. Once I get my salary, let's go to a hot spring, just the three of us. I hope to live a happy life with my parents, this time for sure. You're the famous photographer. Are you shooting today? The woman in front of me is staring at me excitedly. We met on the beach during clamming season, and she seems to know that I'm a photographer. Despite her family of 3 playing in the sand, she listens intently to what I have to say. It's a poignant reminder of my early days as a rookie, when people didn't believe I was a photographer and I barely got any assignments. When I tell her that I'm here for a photo shoot, she eagerly volunteers to be the subject. But could you please not show my child's face? She says this, pointing to a cute little girl. The girl, about 2 or 3 years old, looks at us with her big, adorable eyes wide open. Of course. And what about Dad? When I ask, the father looks pale, glancing around uncertainly and giving vague replies. I guess that's understandable. After all, the dad building a sandcastle with the girl is my husband. My name is Katie. I'm a 30-year-old freelance photographer. For work, I'm often called to school events and weddings in the neighborhood. I capture moments of smiles and friendship, sharing them through my photos. It's not just about taking pictures, but about capturing people's memories and emotions, sharing their happiness. Capturing these joyous moments in people's lives is my job and my passion. But my life's shutter stopped in an instant due to a certain event. My husband, Galton, was a busy businessman. He was involved in the development of leisure facilities and tourist destinations, traveling all over the country. We couldn't spend much time together because of our busy schedules, but the time we did have was special. Even if it was just a little while, the time and smiles with him were what kept me going. I had no intention of quitting my photography. We'll build our careers while supporting each other. We promised and got married. That's when I started looking for ways to work from home instead of being out and about for shoots. First, I posted landscape and permitted portraits on social media as part of my portfolio. By showcasing my work in virtual galleries like online photo exhibitions, not only publishers and peers in photography noticed me, but also a wider general audience. This led to a rapid increase in followers. Thanks to social media, I was able to do live streams, talking about my photography and even making some money from it. I would share my photos while explaining the stories and techniques behind them. Communicating through photography was fun and fulfilling. I balanced outdoor shooting with my social media presence, steadily growing my follower base. Galton was still constantly on business trips. Inevitably, I spent a lot of time with my in-laws, who thankfully took an interest in my social media activities. As I taught them how to use smartphones and social media, we grew closer, and they often tuned into my photos and live streams. Both are wonderful people, and even when Galton was away, I didn't feel lonely and enjoyed fulfilling days. However, there was a significant void in our lives. We couldn't have children. Despite numerous tests, we were unable to conceive. We both wanted kids, so years into our marriage without a child put a strain on us. Initially supportive, Galton grew tired of the financial burden and frequent clinic visits, and I could feel us drifting apart. His involvement in a major project, requiring constant travel, didn't help. His interest shifted from our elusive treatment to his challenging work. He cared less about our childlessness, talking more about work instead. I tried to understand his busyness, but we were emotionally distant. Yesterday, I had a meeting with a client, and it looks like a new project is starting. I'll be away overnight for a while starting next week. As he unpacked dirty shirts from his large suitcase, Galton told me this. He had just gotten back, but I quickly started the laundry. Galton wouldn't bother to clean or buy new shirts otherwise. It's faster and less risky this way, he would say, but I wanted to save where I could. So, about the hospital. That's impossible. You know I have to be there in person, right? I can't leave work, so let's skip it next week. I sighed quietly, so Galton wouldn't hear. I had made an appointment, but there was nothing I could do if he was traveling. Galton's actions caused trouble for his company, and it was painful to see the work he was once praised for being overshadowed by his personal life. I never wanted to be a hindrance. But, you know, as busy as I am, it's tough. Katie, you go out for shoots too, right? Let's both keep up the good work. Yeah. Take care of yourself, Galton. I swallowed my words as he casually dismissed the topic. Maybe Galton no longer wanted children. But I was too afraid to ask. Should I accept this silently, or should I bring it up, even indirectly? The uncertainty was unsettling. I was adept at capturing people's joy and sorrow through my camera. Yet now, I was living each day unaware of my own emotions. Slowly, I felt trapped within the frame of my own photographs. One day, a fine white envelope with the logo of a famous resort company arrived at the house. It didn't seem like just any direct mail, so I hastily opened it. Inside was a voucher for a stay at a luxury hotel by the sea. Apparently for 3 people. Why was this sent to me? Feeling a stir in my heart, I quickly went to Galton.
Galton, this arrived. Do you know anything about it?
Of course, I wasn't accusing him of anything. I was careful not to sound mean, just asking naturally. Galton stopped reading his newspaper and looked at me. His expression was blank, but his gaze hardened slightly, almost glaring. I had never been looked at that way before and couldn't hide the sinking feeling in my chest.
That's for a colleague whose plans didn't work out, so it was sent to us. It's nothing strange, so can I have it back?
He reached out his hand. Without saying a word, I handed him the envelope with the tickets, and he snatched it away. But when he saw the address, he looked back at me with clear annoyance.
This is addressed to me. Don't open my stuff without asking.
I was surprised and hurriedly apologized. However, it wasn't unusual for direct mail to come to my busy salesman husband. We usually disposed of the ones that arrived at home, so I was taken aback by his reaction.
Sorry, I didn't realize it was direct mail. I was just checking. You should have asked me since I'm here today.
Galton took the envelope to his room, and I couldn't ask any more about the tickets. Although I didn't fully understand why he needed to get tickets for a colleague, I had to accept his explanation. But then, half a month later, something else happened. In July, just before Independence Day, and when we had a memorial service planned at my in-laws,
I've got a long business trip,
he suddenly said. I was initially speechless. A business trip? In my work, I often get requests from families or for landscape photography. But I had taken time off for the memorial service. Freelancers and even regular companies usually have Independence Day off. And so did Galton's company, at least in the past. Galton shrugged slightly and forced a smile.
It just came up suddenly. I have to work without a break. So, can you attend the memorial service for me?
I knew he took pride in his work and had been serious about his career even before our marriage. But increasingly, I found myself doubting the reasons for his work and trips. In the end, he left for work, pulling his favorite suitcase. The news reached my in-laws just in time, and while they were angry at his attitude, they made sure I didn't feel uncomfortable.
We're sorry you cleared your schedule for this. When I see Galton next, I'll give him a stern talking to,
said my MIL, Helen. All I could do was give a vague smile. I was supposed to stay a few days after the service. Galton was their only child, and they didn't want me to leave too soon, so I ended up staying as originally planned. I brought my camera and took pictures of my in-laws doing housework, living their daily life, and even landscapes I don't usually focus on. I occupied my time with shooting plans, but part of me felt the absence of Galton, who should have been there. I decided to go to the beach one station away, both for work and a change of scenery. During the spring and summer holidays, the beach is lively with clam digging, and ideal family groups enjoy their time on the sands. Some people are under colorful beach umbrellas, enjoying walks and sunbathing. I walked along the beach with my camera. Suddenly, I stopped at the sound of a familiar voice, coming from a family building a sandcastle. I was glad I wasn't holding my camera. I would have dropped it at the sight. In the circle was Galton. He was with a young woman and a toddler, building a sandcastle together. They looked like a happy family, gathering white sand and shells. I couldn't believe my eyes. But the hotel voucher that had arrived at home, Galton's frequent long business trips, his indifference, it all piled up like sand before me. It would have been an ideal family scene for a photo assignment. But I couldn't believe my husband was there. The child between them looked about 2 or 3 years old. About the time I started feeling Galton drifting away. He had another family. Though I wasn't sure if the child was his, my instincts as a wife told me there was a blood connection. I felt as if a glass frame inside me had shattered mercilessly. The frame was supposed to hold our happy, smiling faces as a couple. I steeled myself and approached. Not Galton, but the woman. She was wearing a large straw hat and looked surprised when I suddenly spoke to her. I forced a smile and apologized for the abrupt approach. Then, I handed her my business card, explaining that I was a freelance photographer. The card only had my professional name, but it also included my social media contact. She looked at the card with interest, then started searching for me on her mobile phone. In the background, Galton, clearly aware of me, was frozen, staring at a spot on the beach. "Would you mind if I take a photo of your family? I sometimes do live streams showing photography tips." "What? I know Katie. I follow you. You post mobile photography tips, right?" She was excited, not knowing my relation to Galton, happy to be approached by a minor celebrity on social media. I was surprised she was a follower, but she was eager, even for a live stream. I hesitantly asked, and before I could finish, "Of course." She was already excitedly agreeing. I felt guilty, like I was deceiving her, but my goal was to document Galton's other family. "Please teach me some photography tips for moms." "Galton, you're okay with it, right?" Galton was caught off guard. Stammering, he tried to avoid looking at me, desperately thinking of an excuse. "We shouldn't, because of the face reveal. I'm a model for brochures, Can you just make sure my child isn't in the frame?" It turned out the other woman, Lisa, was a model I had met through my husband's company's public relations work. Of course, I agreed and adjusted my phone camera to keep the child out of the shot. I quickly set up for a live stream, pretending to teach the mother, with Galton unavoidably in the center of the frame. His forced smile was interpreted positively by viewers, quickly spreading as cute nervous dad. After the stream, I thanked them and left. But within minutes, Galton caught up with me, leaving Lisa and the child behind. I asked him bluntly, "What are you trying to do?" He remained silent, looking annoyed. He probably felt awkward with Lisa and came to me as an escape. I wonder what his intentions were in stopping me. Finally, he spoke heavily. "Katie, understand me. What's there to understand without a proper explanation? It's clear enough if you look. Look, I couldn't help it. I had a child with her before I could with you. It's fine. Lisa's family is wealthy, she doesn't need me to marry her." Galton confessed, his defiance revealing the truth. It seemed unlikely that a young woman who got pregnant would say something so convenient. Probably, Lisa suspected he was married. "I wanted a child. But you couldn't have one. Lisa is nice, and the kid is cute, like her. But it doesn't mean I hate you or don't want to live with you." His contradictory words left me holding my aching head. Apparently, he wanted to maintain the status quo. "I won't bother you. This situation is perfect for me. Isn't this good enough?" How could it be? I should have argued back. But I was so overwhelmed I lost my voice. In my silence, he sighed in victory and was about to leave. But someone unexpected arrived. It was my in-laws. "Galton, who are that woman and child?" My Fael, Nathan, red-faced, confronted him. Galton flinched at their sudden appearance. Why
We saw the live stream notification. Who's the woman and child if you were on a business trip? Skipping a visit home for some unknown woman and a child.
Without waiting for Nathan, Helen stepped in to defend me, showering Galton with fierce words. I was shocked. They had seen the live stream and realized something was wrong. They were stunned to see Galton as a husband with an unfamiliar woman and had rushed over. Confronted by his parents, Galton had to confess everything about Lisa and the child.
Ungrateful child.
He received a strong slap from Helen. Nathan glared at Galton with a look so fierce, I thought he might have punched him if Helen hadn't acted first. My in-laws left Galton behind and came to take me away. Following their apologies and strong encouragement, I decided to divorce. After uncovering evidence of Galton's affair with Lisa, his mistress, the matter was initially settled with a compensation agreement. However, as the divorce proceedings and investigations progressed, various facts came to light. Firstly, it was revealed that Lisa indeed knew Galton was married. Considering she agreed to continue the relationship despite being pregnant, it seemed she had prepared herself for being involved with a married man. Her motivation wasn't just financial, she likely wanted to keep Galton as long as possible. However, she genuinely didn't know that I was his wife and, upon realizing she was following me, blocked all my social media accounts. She angrily started posting on various forums, but this only resulted in more sympathy for me, as she publicly exposed herself as the mistress. It caused trouble in her own family, leading to her being nearly kicked out of her home. Desperately, she even tried to move into my former in-laws' house after I left. But they firmly refused her entry. Next, Galton's secrets began to unravel. During the compensation claim investigations, numerous women and men associated with him came to light. It turned out he had multiple affairs during his business trips, involving repeated liaisons with several women, some of whom were engaged or married. I decided to send out the data from that live stream. A little investigation would reveal that I, his lawful wife, was broadcasting, and the people in the frame were his mistress and their child. As a result, women deceived into thinking he was single, and husbands who felt their wives were stolen, were inflamed with anger and confronted Galton. He found himself facing lawsuits from every direction, with no choice but to accept them all. As more revelations about Galton emerged, Lisa, to everyone's surprise, fled with their child. Clearly out of love, she chose to escape her relationship with him. Lisa's social media uproar eventually settled down, and as her accounts disappeared, I decided to let her go. But considering her nature of boasting about affairs on social media, it was unlikely she would just vanish. True to form, Lisa started using an entirely different account. However, her posts playing the tragic heroine were quickly identified, attracting a wave of criticism. She would delete her account when things got tough, only to reappear under a new one, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Abandoned even by Lisa, Galton's last resort was to turn to his in-laws, but they were enraged upon learning of his multiple affairs. Without any apologies and simply pleading for help, his parents decided to sever ties with their son. Following the scandal, Galton was burdened with substantial compensation payments. As the legal proceedings progressed, inquiries from his mistresses and their husbands flooded his company, complicating the situation even further. Moreover, this wasn't the worst outcome. The unprecedented scandal of his affair and child being exposed on social media was disastrous. The fact that the reveal happened during a business trip made the information spread rapidly, and the company's facilities and reviews were flooded with shocked and angry comments. The fallout from the scandal spread internally and externally, diminishing the company's trust. The executives, feeling a crisis, hastily strategized communication plans, consulting with experts due to their lack of experience in handling such situations. Meanwhile, they strictly instructed employees to provide accurate information to quell the chaos. Inquiries and condemnations from inside and outside the company poured in, and Galton's reputation plummeted. He became an outcast at work, completely isolated. Amidst the uncomfortable atmosphere, he was soon asked to resign and had to look for a new job. Originally proficient and successful in sales, he was favored by an older demographic who didn't use social media and quickly found new employment. However, his nature didn't change. Within half a year, he was involved in new scandals, such as pursuing his manager's wife and attempting to charge a shabby motel stay as a business expense. He was fired, joined new companies, and was repeatedly dismissed for causing turmoil in personal relationships. Now, he seems to be perpetually bouncing from job to job within the industry. Meanwhile, I've maintained a relationship with my former in-laws after the divorce. They've been considerate, allowing me to live peacefully. Their support was crucial for me to move on and start anew after ending my relationship with Galton. Following the divorce, I struggled with photographing children, finding it painful. My in-laws, despite being betrayed by their son, strived to present a united front, supporting me. They helped me believe that my relationship with Galton wasn't everything and that I could trust again. One day, I captured a photo of them talking peacefully. I plan to feature this photo in my upcoming online exhibition as the main piece. Although they were quite shy about it, I believe they'll be happy with it in the end.
Please, take care of them both for me. Hearing this from him, I couldn't help but feel utterly dismayed. I couldn't believe he was asking me to take care of his mistress, too. It's just ridiculous. What? Why don't you ask your parents? What are you talking about? Asking elderly parents to take care of someone? You're a devil. Well, I think Callista would be happy to do it, wouldn't she? And what position are you in to say such a thing? Dave, who should be in a position to ask for help, never loses his arrogant attitude. Seeing him like that, I couldn't help but wonder, what did I see in this guy? Excuse me, coming through. Just then, a new bed was being brought in next to us. I glanced over, and as soon as I realized who it was, I screamed. Huh? Kiera? Because the woman there was someone I knew all too well. I can't believe you're Dave's mistress. As I glared at her while saying this, she looked away. Now what should I do? We're family. Help us out, will you? Watching the two of them trying to cling to me, I pondered. I am Erica, a 35-year-old housewife, raising a lovely 10-year-old son. I have a younger sister, 6 years my junior, and frankly, we don't get along. My sister Kiera is irresponsible, and she ran off with a man as soon as she graduated from high school. I'm sorry, Erica. I shouldn't be causing you stress right now. My parents lamented over Kiera, apologizing to me repeatedly for causing me trouble. I was pregnant at the time, and they didn't want to tell me. However, when Kiera ran away, she took all the money from home, so they had no choice but to contact me. Indeed, at that time, I was mentally disturbed thinking about my sister. Are you okay, Erica? You need to prioritize the child in your belly right now. It was Dave, my husband, who supported me then. He suggested I go back to my parents' house for the birth, saying he was worried about me. Following his advice, I was able to support my parents with my savings and safely give birth to our son, Louis. By the way, I have already been repaid the money by my parents. Thank you, Dave. Because of your suggestion, I was able to feel relieved. Don't worry about it. I asked you to quit your job for me, so it's the least I can do. I used to work at the same company as him. Back then, Dave was my trainer at work. I admired Dave, who taught me everything carefully, and after he confessed, we started dating. And when I got pregnant with Lewis, we had a shotgun marriage. At that time, I want my wife to stay at home. If you don't mind, could you quit your job? So I decided to become a housewife. Although I had some regrets about leaving my job, it worked out well, as I could support my parents. And the arrival of Lewis brightened our previously gloomy home. Mom, is there anything I can help with? Well, you could clean the bath. Sure, leave it to me. Lewis, who has grown up quite a bit, is still very sweet and obedient. He plays energetically every day and does his homework if I ask him to. His current craze seems to be helping around the house, frequently asking me if there's anything he can do. I'm always healed by his eagerness to help and his joyful attitude. I'm done. Thank you. Here's your payment for helping. Yay! Well, maybe the allowance I give him for helping is what he's after. But living with my beloved family like this, I was truly happy. One day, while I was doing housework, I got a call from my mother-in-law, Callista. We haven't seen each other in a while. Come over this weekend and bring Lewis. I'll prepare a feast. I'm sorry, but we already have plans for this weekend. Is that so? Can't you change your plans? Does it have to be this weekend? I replied to Callista saying, I'll discuss it with Dave, and somehow evaded giving a direct answer. It hasn't even been a month since our last visit. I know she's not a bad person, but it's not like my in-laws are bad people, and they don't harass me. However, Callista adores her only son, Dave, and her only grandchild, Lewis. That's why she's so eager to have them at her house. It's not that I mind going to my in-laws' house, and generally, as a daughter-in-law, I'm not burdened with chores. They treat me like a guest, not even letting me into the kitchen to help. However, being at the in-laws is always a bit stressful. Lewis is just like me, really smart. Good thing he didn't take after Erica. She was slow at work, might have struggled with her studies. And when we go there, Dave starts drinking from the afternoon. Then he talks about me in a mocking way to his father-in-law Walton. Erica should be a bit more flexible. When Dave says this, Walton, without hearing my side, typically responds that way. It's always been unpleasant for me. There's another thing I dislike. Grandma says we should come over this weekend. What do you want to do, Lewis? If it's Dad's side, I don't want to go. Lewis dislikes going to his paternal grandparents. At 10, he finds it boring. True, the area around the in-laws is just a quiet residential neighborhood, with no parks or nature to play in. They have a garden, but it's under Walton's meticulous care, so it's hardly a place to run around. Lewis brings homework or games, but you don't need to do homework. Lewis is smart enough. Games are boring. I don't understand them. Let's talk with Grandma and Grandpa instead. His doting grandparents take the games away. And even when I object, they just say, yes, yes, and don't stop. And Dave holds me back with that, it's okay once in a while. It's natural for Lewis to find it dull. I'd rather go with Dad and Mom than to Dad's mom's house. Sometimes Lewis asks Dave this. Visiting my parents is an outing. He dismissively replies, even when I argue that Lewis's opinion should be heard. Indulging every whim isn't good for his education. That's what I get in return. Dave says this, but he's never really been involved in parenting. When Lewis was a baby, he'd visit occasionally while I stayed at my parents' house. Diaper changing, bathing, it was all left to me or my parents. He hardly ever held Lewis. When I said I wanted to return home, he said, it's still tough for both of us. Better to stay at your parents' house. Back then, I thought he was being considerate, but now it seems he just didn't want to be involved in childcare. Maybe he finds taking Lewis to his parents easier than dealing with him himself. Dad doesn't care about me. That's what Lewis says about his father. I scold him for it, but inside, I'm troubled. Incidentally, this week I plan to take Lewis to my parents' house. So when Dave came home, I tried to talk him out of visiting his parents. My parents' house should take precedence. But we went there almost every week last month, and it's only been half a month since. We haven't been to my parents' house in nearly a year, despite staying there when Lewis was a baby. My in-laws call us every week because of the stay at their house during my postpartum period. They couldn't see the baby at will then, so now they want him here, is their reasoning. To set the record straight, it's not like they never saw him as a baby. They stayed at my parents' house for almost a week. Back then, my in-laws acted like mere guests. And since coming back here, we've only visited them 2 or 3 times a year. Your parents' house is boring to me. Enough already. We decided on this visit to my parents half a year ago. If you prefer your parents' house so much, why don't you go alone? Then I'll do that. Dave agrees readily. I can't help but wonder if he really cares about our family. I shake off such thoughts quickly, but they only lead to more worries. That's why I decided to start working from home, just in case. I don't earn much, but it keeps me from dwelling on unnecessary thoughts, and having some savings gives me a little peace of mind. If I want Dave to be closer, I have to be closer too. That's how I started to see things more objectively, but my efforts turned out to be in vain. Dad, Mom, long time no see. Ah, long time indeed. You've grown so much, Lewis. And so, as planned, I took Lewis and went back to my parents' house. My father Rudolph and mother Leonora were thrilled to see Lewis after such a long time, and Lewis looked really happy too. Lewis, I practiced the game you said you liked. Would you like to play it together? Really? I want to. Oh, but I have to do my homework first. That's good of you. Then use the living room. Your mom and I will prepare the meal while you're working on your homework. My parents prioritized Lewis's wish like that. Just that made me feel better, compared to my in-laws. What's wrong? You look worried. My mother noticed my troubled expression and spoke to me. Since Lewis was occupied with my father, I decided to confide in my mother about recent events. True, we monopolized him when he was a baby, but that was only for about 2 months after his birth. And ignoring Lewis's wishes like that? Honestly, I wonder if continuing this marriage is just going to make Lewis suffer. That's something to think about. You should have a serious talk with Dave. And remember, if it comes to that, we're here to support you. You can always come back home. I felt a deep gratitude for my mother's words. I knew my father would say the same. Just then, I'm home, I heard that voice. And as my mother and I exchanged surprised glances, a woman with a little girl came in. Kiera? Hey, big sis. Why are you here at our parents' house? The woman was Kiera, my sister, whom I hadn't seen in 10 years. The little girl, about Lewis's age, was hiding behind her. Kiera. What are you doing here? Our parents were also surprised by her sudden return. Ignoring our reactions, Kiera casually dropped her bags and said, I'm tired. Put these in my room. Sensing the strange atmosphere, Lewis quickly came to my side. Kiera, what have you been doing all this time? I got married where I eloped, too. Summarizing Kiera's story, she had a daughter, Aaliyah, at the place she eloped to. She had been living with her family of 3, but now she was back as a single mother after getting divorced. You're always so selfish. Stop causing us trouble. My father shouted at Kiera, who was smiling nonchalantly. Seeing our father's anger, the children hiding behind their mothers looked scared. Dad, calm down. The kids are getting scared. Sorry. My father calmed down after seeing the children, each hiding behind their mother. Realizing we couldn't continue this conversation in front of them, I told Louis to go to his room for a while. So, Kiera, what are you planning to do now? Once Louis was in his room, my mother asked Kiera that question. Of course, I'll stay here. I can't raise Aaliyah alone. At her words, our gazes turned to Aaliyah. She was warily observing us. She had a cute face, resembling Kiera. The thought of kicking out my niece, who was feeling insecure because of her mother, made us decide to let Kiera stay for the time being. Thanks, then I'll go buy the essentials for living. Wait a minute. Unable to stop my sister as she quickly left, an awkward silence fell over us, and Aaliyah, who was looking down. I'm Louis. What's your name? I'm Aaliyah. Nice to meet you. I've got some games. Let's play together. Louis, coming out of his room, kindly spoke to Aaliyah, breaking the tense atmosphere. Thanks to him, Aaliyah slowly began to let her guard down. Since then, Kiera had become totally dependent on our parents' home. Occasionally, I'd hear from them on the phone, how they were being totally thrown off by her. This means going back to my parents' house is difficult now. Hearing that, I felt like I'd lost my refuge. And sighed at the thought of not being able to divorce. Louis looked up at me worried. Why are you sighing? One day, as I sighed, Dave spoke to me. I told him about Kiera, and he just replied with a nonchalant, Despite my worries, Dave wasn't serious about listening to me. Why don't you help your sister? Dave said this irresponsibly, noticing my displeasure. Just as I was about to retort, the doorbell rang. Ding-dong! Ah, there she is. Kiera. Opening the front door, I saw Kiera and Aaliyah standing there. Apparently, they had gotten our address from my parents. I've got something urgent to take care of. Take care of Aaliyah for me, will you? With that, Kiera left Aaliyah with us and left before I could stop her. Wait! Is that the sister you mentioned? I called out to Kiera, who quickly disappeared, and Dave came over. Dave appeared, having been apparently watching us. Yes, that's her. I'll scold her when she comes back to pick up Aaliyah. Surprised by his words, I looked at Dave. It was rare for him to take charge like this, but I decided to leave it in his hands. Having Aaliyah thrust upon us was troubling, but it meant we could avoid the planned visit to my in-laws. Seeing Louis taking the initiative to talk to Aaliyah, they started playing together. I watched them, smiling, and observed Dave, who was unusually cheerful. Erica, I've come to pick up Aaliyah. I'll handle it. You stay with Louis. Kiera returned when it was dark outside. Dave took Aaliyah to meet her, and he came back even more cheerful. The kid understood well. Said it was an emergency this time, and will be more careful in the future. Really? I was a bit suspicious. But after that day, Kiera stopped coming to our house. She had apparently calmed down at my parents' house too. Meanwhile, Dave started saying he was busy, going on late-night work, and sudden business trips. He explained to his parents that his work was keeping him from visiting them. So we no longer had to go to the in-laws as often. Still, it seemed suspicious. That's what I thought. Then it happened. Next weekend, I have to go on a business trip. It'll be a bit long. Oh, really? Take care. Dave was going on a week-long business trip. I was suspicious, but decided to see him off with a smile. Hey, can I come over now? I called my parents and found out Kiera was not home, so I decided to take Louis back to my parents' house. Louis noticed Aaliyah and immediately invited her to play. Aaliyah, who seemed to have opened up to Louis, happily accepted. Welcome back. I said we'd be here for you, but I'm sorry we couldn't do more. It's all right. I never thought Kiera would come back. Hey, you too. Look at the TV. While chatting with my mother, my father called us to check the TV. There was news of a plane crash. Wow, that's terrible. Lots of people are seriously injured. Most of the victims had been rescued, but many were seriously injured. Then my phone rang with an unknown number. Hello? Yes, Dave is my husband, but... What? What happened? Dave was on that plane. He's been rescued but taken to the hospital urgently. The call was from the hospital. I left Lewis with my parents and headed straight to the hospital. In the crash, Dave was saved, but had sustained serious injuries. I'm Dave's wife. Right this way. A nurse led me to Dave's room. There he was, lying in the hospital bed. Dave?
Hey there, Erica.
Surprisingly, Dave seemed quite energetic, so I asked for details. Apparently, he had become paraplegic due to the accident.
Really, it's the worst. It was supposed to be a trip with my mistress.
What? Mistress?
I thought you hadn't realized. This business trip was a lie.
I was stunned by his words, spoken without any remorse. Dave continued, unashamed.
Both she and I are now paraplegic because of this. You're the only one who can take care of us.
What are you saying? My concern for him vanished, along with my love for Dave.
Please take care of us both.
Dave pleaded, but I was utterly dismayed by his request. He expected me to take care of his mistress too? I couldn't believe it. What? Why don't you ask your parents?
What are you talking about? Asking elderly parents to take care of someone? You're a devil.
Well, I'm sure Callista would be happy to do it, wouldn't she? In what position are you to say such a thing? Despite being in a position to ask for help, Dave maintained his arrogant attitude. Seeing this, I couldn't help but wonder, what did I ever see in him? Excuse me, coming through. At that moment, a new bed was brought into the room next to us. I glanced over, and realizing who it was, I involuntarily screamed. Kira? The woman there was someone I knew very well. Apparently, because they were together, they were brought to the same hospital room. The mistress brought next to Dave was none other than my sister Kiera. I can't believe you were Dave's mistress. As I glared at her, Kiera looked away. Dave, taking over for Kiera, began to explain. Apparently, they had exchanged contact information on the day Kiera left Leah with us. On the days Dave claimed to be working late or on business trips, the two of them were meeting and nurturing their love. Hearing this, my anger reached its peak. So you both betrayed us and got into a crash, and now you want me to take care of you? That's audacious. What should I do now? As I was thinking, Dave said something quite annoying.
Come on, we're family. Help us out, will you?
Please, Erica. Watching the two of them cling to me, I started to think, now's my chance to say what I want. For you two, family seems to be a very convenient concept.
That's not what we meant.
Then what does family mean to you? A father who doesn't participate in parenting? Who forces his son to go places he doesn't want to? Dave finally fell silent, realizing my anger. My gaze then turned to Kiera. You've always wanted what others have, to the point of stealing boyfriends, making everyone dislike you. The aftermath always fell on me and our parents. Is that what family means to you? Just causing trouble? But... Well, now neither of you can cheat again, right? Why don't you two just marry each other? Dave and Kiera, seemingly not expecting me to be this angry, were stunned. The nurses who had been observing us were quietly talking amongst themselves. For now, I'll explain things to both families. As for the future, you two figure it out. With that, I left the room. I then explained the situation to both families. My parents said,
They got what they deserved. It's divine retribution.
We're appalled. We can't take care of them anymore. They refused to take Kiara back. Dave's parents, on the other hand, were persuaded by Callista and Walton to take them in. Oh, and I'm getting a divorce, so don't rely on me. To that, Callista said, I wish you'd reconsider. But it wasn't me who responded. It was Lewis.
You guys are the worst. You don't care about Mom who was betrayed.
Callista turned pale at his words. She tried to make excuses, but neither I nor Lewis wanted to hear any more. Further investigation revealed that Dave had been cheating for a long time. It started around the time I resigned. He suggested going back to my parents for childbirth because it made it easier for him to cheat. He had me quit my job because his mistress at the time was from the same company to avoid getting caught. I was really made a fool of. I went to the hospital room with the investigation results and divorce papers. Unlike when I arrived, Dave and Kiara had shrunk in size, probably realizing the situation after our conversation and receiving cold stares from the nurses. Sign this.
Wait, if you divorce me,
Callista will take care of you. I ignored their pleas and quickly finalized the divorce. Then I went back to my parents' house with Lewis. Now, the problem is, left at my parents' house was Aaliyah. She was a victim too. So my parents and I discussed what to do. Eventually, they hired a detective to find Aaliyah's father, Bud. Finally, we met Bud.
Thank you for contacting me. I have always been concerned about Aaliyah.
Apparently, he and Kiara divorced due to her affair. Bud claimed custody, but there were mediators who believed the child should be with the mother. Because of that, he lost custody. About Kiara, I started explaining Kiara's current situation. He apologized, saying,
I'm sorry for the trouble we've caused.
Looking at him, he didn't seem like someone who would elope with a minor like Kiara, so I asked him about the elopement.
Actually, she first approached me, using your name.
What? Apparently my sister used my insurance card to approach Bud, and falsified various things about her identity. She then demanded marriage after claiming to be pregnant.
Though I was deceived, I truly love Kiara. Above all, I still love our daughter, Aaliyah. That's why I want to take custody of her.
I think you are capable of taking good care of her. So I decided to entrust Aaliyah to him. When Bud and I returned home with Aaliyah, she hugged him with a big smile.
We'll be together from now on.
Really? I'm so happy. And with that, they left smiling. With Aaliyah's safety secured, we decided to move. Staying at my parents' house, Dave and the others might come looking for us. The detective told me it seems those two visited the house once. We had a detective watching their movements. Dave and Kiara, after being discharged, tried to rely on me and visited my parents' house, being pushed in wheelchairs by Dave's parents. However, by then nobody was there, so they went to Dave's parents' house together. Apparently, Kiara was allowed to live there as Dave's loved one, but Walton and Callista, being elderly, were struggling with their care, and their days were filled with arguments. Well, that was to be expected. Dave, Kiara, and his parents are all selfish. They try to force their views on others. People like me and my parents who tolerate them maintained a balance. Now that I was gone, conflicts were inevitable. Well, it's none of my business anymore. I had no sympathy for them. Still, I had to make sure to cover all my bases. With that in mind, I headed to a law firm. A few days later, I was out with Lewis.
I'm so happy to go shopping with Mom.
Lewis was in a great mood, as we hadn't been out much lately, while I was smiling at his happiness. Erica! I was startled by my sister's voice and froze. Seeing her struggling to push her wheelchair, I thought of grabbing Lewis and running away. Aaliyah, isn't she with you? But hearing her ask about Aaliyah first, I decided to listen to her story. We went to a nearby cafe. Initially, I was staying at Dave's house, but Kiera was the lowest in the pecking order in that house. She was ostracized and bore the brunt of their frustration. In the midst of such days, she became concerned about Aaliyah. Once worried, she wanted to see Aaliyah, even though she knew she had no right, so she somehow escaped from Dave's house. But with nowhere to go, she wandered the streets. That's when I heard Lewis's voice. She found us guided by his voice. But without Aaliyah, she panicked and approached me. Aaliyah is with Bud. At my words, Kiera froze, then smiled in relief. Bud's place is safe for her. Have you thought about what you'll do next? I have one person who said they'll help me. That person is a friend she met while eloping, who works at a support facility. They agreed to take care of her for a while. Apparently, they were supposed to pick her up tomorrow, and she escaped before that. She scolded me for acting impulsively, but she's coming to pick me up. To Kiera, who said this, I handed her a document. It was a list of jobs that could be done even by someone in a wheelchair. What's this? It's because I'm going to claim alimony from you. You seem remorseful, so I'll allow installments. Find a job. Okay, I'm sorry. After that, Kiera left with a friend who came to pick her up. Maybe she can still turn her life around. Sorry for taking up your time. Shall we go shopping? Then Lewis and I left the cafe. But then...
Erica?
We ran into Dave. His parents were nearby, looking around, probably in search of Kiera. Do you need something?
Hey, can't we start over? It's better to be together as a family, right?
Stop joking. I have no intention of going back to you. Dave approached me out of self-preservation, unlike Kiera. Disappointed by his attitude, I gave him a cold look. I want the compensation from the divorce and child support in a lump sum.
I'm ashamed that Dad is my father.
Dave stopped in his tracks at our cold response. We turned our backs on him and walked away. Kiera was better than him, in a way. Focusing on shopping with Lewis, I put these thoughts aside.
Erica! Lewis!
His voice no longer reached me. Later, with the help of a lawyer, I claimed alimony from both of them. Kiera started to pay the alimony. Apparently, she's struggling with her new life and job. Her friend only offers minimal help. Kiera was so obedient and cute when she was little. Perhaps the hardships have brought back some of her old self. As for Dave, he had a hard time too. He ended up selling his parents' house and using all their retirement funds to pay the lump sum. Am I being too harsh? Even though they were at fault, it might be too much to demand from someone paraplegic. It's nothing for you to worry about.
That's right. You're just asserting your rightful claim.
My parents reassured me when I felt a bit guilty. As for Aaliyah, she seems happy with Bud. According to Bud, she has grown fond of Lewis, who is kind to her. Hearing this made me feel relieved. Sometime later, I received a letter from Bud. It contained parts of a letter Kiera had written to Bud. I always wanted to be like Erica, but I couldn't be her. I became reckless and lost my way. But I truly fell in love with Bud and genuinely love Aaliyah. She concluded with, I don't deserve to see Aaliyah or Erica. Kiera probably won't appear before me again. That's the punishment she imposed on herself. Mom, can I go to my friend's house today? Sure, but make sure you come back before it's late. In our new home, Lewis has made friends and enjoys school. I will continue to live a peaceful life with my precious family. With that thought, I watched Lewis run off energetically.
When the old lady dies, we'll get the insurance money. More importantly, I'm going on a business trip tomorrow, so get ready.
I became involved in a romantic relationship and eventually married Donald, whom I was assigned to train after he joined our company mid-career. However, I was unaware of Donald's true nature. I couldn't believe he could say such things so casually. One day, there was something I absolutely had to tell Donald, but I couldn't get in touch with him, no matter how long I waited. Donald already knew where I was. It seemed like he was enjoying his business trip, but I wanted him to be prepared for what awaited him when he returned. 2 weeks later, I had to comfort a cheerful Donald with the truth when he returned home. "Your mother's funeral. It's over."
What?
He seemed unable to grasp the reality, but I wondered what his expression would be once he did. By then, it would be too late. He would learn firsthand the meaning of the phrase, "Spilled milk can't be put back in the bottle." My name is Karen. I'm turning 40 this year. I work at a jam company located in a rural area. After graduating from college, I found myself working at a company I joined on a whim. However, I soon realized that this wasn't what I truly wanted to do. So at the age of 25, I made a bold decision to change careers. Since switching to this jam company 15 years ago, I've experienced quite a lot. Looking back, I'm satisfied with the way I work. Seeing my ideas and envisioned jams take shape and reach our many fans is when I feel most fulfilled. The moments when people enjoy our jam and tell me how delicious it is are what make me happy. "You're still working hard, I see." "Mrs. President, I've just heard that the packaging for our new flavor is almost ready, and I can't wait to see the finished product." "That's great, but don't overdo it, Karen. This company would be in trouble without you." "Thank you for your kind words." Lisa, our president, took over the jam company started by her husband and has been working hard as a second-generation president. After her husband passed away, she vowed not to let the company he left behind fail and has single-handedly built it up to where it is today. I've always admired her and wanted to be like her. In a way, she's my role model. Lisa appreciates my work, so all I can do is work hard to live up to that. Then one day, during a busy work day, Lisa called me into a separate room. "Did you need me?" "Sorry to bother you during your busy work, but I have a favor to ask. I need someone to train our new employee." I was surprised when I saw the person Lisa introduced. "Wait, this person is..." "Did you recognize him, Karen? There's no point in hiding it, so I'll just say it. He's my son. I want him to eventually be able to handle sales and administrative tasks, so I thought I'd ask you." I was surprised to be entrusted with such an important task. Are you sure I'm the right person for this?" "Please don't say someone like me, Karen. You've always worked hard since you joined the company. I've seen it, so I'm sure." "What should I call you, then?" At that moment, he stepped forward and introduced himself.
I'm Donald. I used to work in sales at a manufacturer, but I decided to switch jobs because I wanted to protect this company. I look forward to your guidance."
He was refreshingly forthright, and his clear way of speaking left a good impression. He seemed to catch on quickly at work and had the ability to think and act independently. His experience in sales at his previous job was reassuring. I felt comfortable entrusting him with work.
Karen.
The normally articulate Donald was uncharacteristically hesitant. I felt a sense of unease at this change in his behavior. "What's wrong? Is there a problem?"
No, it's not that. Do you like movies?
"Movies? Yes, I like them. I haven't had time to go see any recently, though."
How about we go to a movie sometime? There's one I've been wanting to see, but I find it hard to go alone.
His face turned red as he asked me out to a movie. "Oh, I've been wanting to see that movie too. Shall we go together? How about on our next day off?"
Great, thank you. Let's plan for this Sunday then.
"Don't mention it. It's not work after all. I'm looking forward to it."
I had never been in a relationship with a man before. My life had been devoted to studies and work. So naturally, I was nervous about the day I had arranged to go to the movies with Donald. However, my time with Donald turned out to be so enjoyable that it blew away all my nerves. We shared fun and interesting stories we couldn't talk about at work, and I found myself wanting to know more about Donald, to talk with him more. Fortunately, it seemed Donald felt the same way.
In fact, I've been interested in you since I joined the company here, and if you're okay with someone like me, will you marry me?
Yes, I'd be happy to. I look forward to a long future together. I never thought that me, a work-focused woman, unfamiliar with men, would meet and marry someone I wanted to be with this much. The first few months of our marriage were smooth. It was surprisingly blissful to share life with someone I loved. Donald had learned all the work tasks and was already working independently. However, I couldn't overlook the true side of Donald that gradually began to emerge. He did nothing around the house. Or rather, he couldn't. Having lived alone for a long time, he had his own rules and never found it necessary to do household chores. Donald's surroundings were always a mess. Honestly, since we both worked, I thought it was important to share household duties to create a comfortable living space. But Donald didn't seem to mind how messy the room was. Before we got married, he said something about doing chores when no one noticed them, but it ended up being me who had to do everything. I told you to put your laundry in the basket, didn't I? Don't just throw your socks in the hallway.
Why should I be ordered around in my own home? Do you want me to not even take off my socks when I come home?
No one's saying that. I'm just asking you to put your socks in the laundry basket. Why does it have to turn to this?
Huh. You're really annoying. It's my own home, and I can't relax. Being with you feels like I'm always at work. Like I have to be on edge all the time.
He would always deflect the argument and become infuriated. Then he would storm out of the house. Once he left, it was typical for him not to contact me for days. A departmental transfer after our marriage meant Donald was working in a different department, so I didn't have to endure awkward moments at work. He seemed to be coming to work all right, but I wish he would stop clicking his tongue every time we passed in the hallway. It was irritating to hear that sound every time we passed each other. It was like dealing with a small child. After a while, he would return home as if nothing happened. And I decided not to stir up trouble by saying nothing.
Hey Karen, there's a game I've been wanting to buy. It's okay if I get it, right?
Knowing I dislike conflict and tend to clam up when arguments escalate, he spoke with that understanding. Not wanting to escalate the conversation and create more conflict in the same house, I reluctantly agreed. It's fine. I'm sorry for not considering how tired you must be from work. In a feeble attempt to push back, I echoed his sentiment, but it seemed to have no impact on Donald. In fact, he didn't seem to notice at all. He only seemed to hear my approval and was already meticulously choosing which video game to buy on a website. The way he acted, as if nothing was wrong, after I had been worried about Donald not coming home and wondering if I had communicated poorly, left me with nothing to do but sigh. Then one day, I received a call from my mother back home. My mother and I have a very close relationship, and we go on a trip together once or twice a year. Ever since I started working, I've been paying for these trips as a small way to give back to her, and inviting her has become an annual tradition. My mother is surprisingly active for her age, and I'm always happy that she readily agrees to my invitations. This year, I thought it would be fun to go all out and visit a theme park. I was looking at the website when Donald came home, but I didn't notice.
What are you looking at so intently?
Oh, welcome home. I was just thinking of going on a trip with Mom. It's like an annual tradition, making memories together. Donald's expression soured, as if he'd bitten into something bitter.
You're the type to still hang out with your mother, even after becoming a working adult?
What's so strange about going on a trip with my mother? Is it weird? I was just trying to decide where to go.
So you'll be away from home for the trip?
I won't be gone long, just overnight, don't worry. Donald glanced around the room before responding.
You're married and still going on trips with your mother? What about me? And if no one cleans for a day, the house will get dusty.
I was amazed that someone who had never done any cleaning could say that, but I argued back anyway. We both work during the day, so the house doesn't get that dirty. Besides, I'll make sure to clean thoroughly before we leave.
Anyway, about this trip, I never said you could go. Don't you lack awareness as a wife who should be taking care of the home?
I thought to myself that I also work full-time, but realized it was futile to argue further and said nothing. After all, I'm an adult. Donald shouldn't have any trouble managing for a day without me. Then Donald snorted arrogantly, as if he had misunderstood something.
The recently hired Nancy seems much more capable than you.
Nancy is a woman who joined our company this year, working in the same department as Donald. I didn't understand why he brought her up suddenly, but I didn't want to contribute to the conversation, so I didn't ask. Looking back, I wish I had delved deeper into what he meant about Nancy. I decided to go on the trip with my mother despite Donald's objections. However, 5 days before the trip with my mother, on a Sunday, I received a call from an unknown number. Thinking it was work-related, I answered casually, but it turned out to be from a hospital. My mother had been in a traffic accident and was urgently taken to the hospital. What should I do? Mom has been taken to the hospital because of a traffic accident.
Huh?
Donald didn't take his eyes off the video game on the TV screen and seemed hardly to be listening. Anxious and unable to sit still, I decided to go to my mother. Fortunately, it was Sunday, and neither of us had work, so we could rush over immediately. I asked Donald to come with me. Come with me, Donald. I'm too anxious to go alone.
Why should I?
I was speechless at Donald's unexpected response.
Why do I have to go see that old lady? I have work right after this is over.
He was so engrossed in his video game, claiming to have work soon after was just a lazy excuse. How can you say that at a time like this?
Huh? You're saying I'm lying? What a hassle.
Hassle?
Anyway, I can't go. Make sure you're back by dinner.
Was Donald always like this? He used to be a caring and kind person before he got married. And now he's worried about his dinner at a time like this.
All you're good for is housework, right? I don't know if my mom liked you, but you're just being flattered and acting stupid. At least do a decent job taking care of me and cooking.
How can you say that when my mom might be dying in a traffic accident?
If the old lady dies, we'll get the insurance money. Anyway, prepare for my business trip starting tomorrow.
Despite my urgent concern for my mother's condition and my desire to rush to her side immediately, Donald only spoke about his meal and upcoming business trip, showing no interest in going with me. This made me fear the worst-case scenario, getting caught up in his pace and not making it in time to see my mother possibly one last time. I knew I would never forgive myself if that happened. I already knew what I had to do. Anyway, I'm going. I don't know how late I'll be, so handle your own meal. You should be able to manage your travel preparations, at least packing your clothes and underwear. Shaking off Donald, I managed to reach the hospital where my mother was admitted. However, the damage from the traffic accident was severe, and her consciousness remained unstable. Even when she did wake, her consciousness was often not clear, and I found myself constantly unsettled, watching the monitors. My only wish was for her to regain full consciousness and recover quickly. I wanted to be by her side and take care of her as long as I could. Yet my mobile phone kept ringing. It was Donald, sending messages filled with accusations about how inadequate I was as a wife. The messages ranged from wife disqualification to you lacked the resolve to be a future president's wife. Everything he could think of to blame me. Clearly, he was upset that I'd rushed to the hospital without paying heed to his complaints. The messages became increasingly lengthy, becoming so painful to read that they were sent one after another. Caring for my mother, life with Donald, work. I knew I shouldn't weigh these against each other, yet my emotions continued to sway. It was impossible to stay calm in such a situation. Noticing my hectic state, going back and forth between work and the hospital, the president summoned me to her office. I heard from other employees. It must be hard. Don't worry about work. Just stay by your mother's side. Thank you. I haven't had a chance to inform our clients because it was so sudden. I might need to come to the office depending on the timing, but I don't know when I can fully return to work. Don't worry about that. Just let me know when you have a timetable for returning. I'm waiting for your mother to get better and for you to come back. Thank you. Filled with a sense of guilt and gratitude. For now, since I'm at work, I need to take care of what I can and then head to the hospital where my mother is waiting. As I opened my computer to work, I noticed something on one of the multiple monitors visible from my seat. Our company often rents monthly apartments for distant work assignments. The security is top-notch, linked with a security company. The entrance camera feeds can be checked from the company's computers 24/7. Two figures appeared on the entrance camera. Donald? This monthly rental apartment is reserved for female employees. Although Donald said he was on a business trip, he wasn't supposed to use this apartment. Why was Donald there? At an apartment that should be used by another female employee at this time? Then, I saw him leaving the entrance hand in hand with a female employee, looking into each other's eyes. Why would Donald do this? My mind was filled with these thoughts. At a time when my mother was seriously injured in a traffic accident, Donald was on a date with another woman, instead of visiting or accompanying me at the hospital. I decided to use the footage from the monitor as evidence, recording it on my mobile phone. This recorded footage might serve as evidence if something were to happen. I couldn't believe that my husband was cheating, and I was uncertain about how to report this to my mother-in-law. To me, he is my husband. To her, he is her son. Miscommunicating could cause a rift in our relationship moving forward. As I was contemplating this, the phone rang. The caller ID showed the familiar number of the hospital. I had seen this number so often that I memorized it. During work, in the middle of the night, the phone would ring multiple times, each call making my body tense up. I couldn't help but fear the worst-case scenario. It was a number that overflowed with unwelcome emotions and thoughts. I became frightened that something might have happened while I was away from the hospital, checking on my mother's condition. Hesitantly, I answered the phone and was informed of an unbelievable fact. I rushed to the hospital, unable to accept what was happening. I needed to inform Donald about the situation, but I couldn't get through to him. Please answer the phone. I continued to call Donald, almost like praying, but it kept going to voicemail, and there was no sign of him answering. Eventually, even the voicemail stopped activating, and the call would just disconnect. Probably he got annoyed with my repeated calls and decided to block my number. Despite being troubled by the lack of connection, I knew I had to do what was necessary. All I could do was take care of what needed to be done. I decided to return home and prepare what was needed. With a multitude of thoughts about what to do next, my mind was in turmoil when Donald returned. I'm back. I brought some tasty meat as a souvenir from my trip, so cook it for me. Hearing his carefree voice, I realized Donald had returned. Donald, you're back. You're late.
Yeah, I got held up with some work. It took longer to return than I expected.
Donald, I sent you messages. As I was choosing my words, Donald suddenly started to rejoice.
So, the old lady finally died. You were her only child, right? You don't have a father, so you'll receive the full amount of the insurance money, won't you?
While saying this, Donald showed me a catalog.
I've had my eye on this car for a while. What do you think? If you say you want to go for a drive in the passenger seat, I might take you.
What was he talking about? Your mother's funeral. It's over.
Huh?
That's right. Your mother's funeral. I tried contacting you several times, but couldn't get through. Donald seemed unable to comprehend the situation.
Huh? I didn't hear about it. It's your mother's, right?
She seemed to have been out buying sweets. At that time, she stumbled on the sidewalk and then stepped onto the road.
What? Really?
He shook me strongly, asking for confirmation. As he shook me, I struggled to respond. I was troubled because I couldn't contact you. There are things you just don't understand unless you're the biological child, right?
What do you mean by things you don't understand if you're not the biological child?
It seems Lisa had written a letter. I only found out about it from the lawyer. They said I can't see the contents until Donald returns. Then Donald stood up abruptly and raised his voice.
Lawyer, I can't see the contents until I return, which means?
I'll contact the lawyer right away. I was told to do so as soon as you returned.
Oh, do that. My luck is turning at this timing. I'll get both the insurance money and the company.
While we were on the way to the lawyer's office, Donald was muttering to himself, looking at his mobile phone, saying he wanted this and that. What was revealed at the lawyer's office was the existence of a will. A letter. It was a will? It appears that mother-in-law had written a will and entrusted it to her old friend, who was a lawyer. Mother-in-law had thought ahead about what would happen after she was gone, which was just like her. According to the will, the company was to be handed over to me, her daughter-in-law. Even if circumstances led to a divorce, the will stated that the company should be left to me, and I should serve as the president. I didn't know about this.
What? That's ridiculous. Why would the wife get it when the real son is here? What about me?
Since that was all written in the will, Donald shouted,
Hey, this can't be valid. And what's this about a divorce?
I calmed the shouting Donald down and left the office. After a few days, Donald seemed to have thought it over. He came to me as if nothing had happened before, acting affectionately.
Hey, if you're the president, then naturally, I can become at least the vice president, right? I can't stand working under you, but I'm not just an ordinary employee.
His thinking that he could become the vice president was hard to comprehend. I called Donald into a room at the workplace. Donald, you can't always just be an ordinary employee. Please check this document.
If I sign this, I'll be the vice president, or maybe even the chairman, right? Either way, show it to me quickly.
I handed Donald a single document.
A termination notice? What's this?
As you can see, I intend to fire you.
What? That's ridiculous. So this is revenge for my attitude, huh?
This is a summary of the reasons. I showed him a document outlining his numerous problematic behaviors, misusing company funds, repeatedly engaging in unnecessary entertainment, causing discomfort to clients, and the unauthorized use of the company's monthly rental apartment. I had heard from Lisa and did some digging. The more I looked, the more came out. I know about you entering the monthly rental apartment that was rented for a female employee.
Then it's termination? If that's the case, then fine. You can work hard and support me.
This is not about the home. We're talking about work right now.
Ah, yes. Finally, I'll have a life being supported. Well, it's easier that way.
Donald signed the document without properly checking it. I confirmed the signature and took out another document.
A divorce application? What does this mean?
It's a divorce. This is not as a president, but as your wife's final request.
What do you mean, divorce? I was planning to live off your earnings from now on.
He looked at me with pleading eyes, as if clinging on. Using the company's money to cheat on me so nonchalantly?
No, I was out of my mind at that time, Karen. You're my only real love.
There's no such thing as a main love in marriage. You cheated and took that attitude because you were prepared for the consequences, right? As I stated this calmly, Donald began to panic.
Don't abandon me like this. If I'm fired from the company and divorced from you, how am I supposed to live?
You're an adult. You can earn your living, can't you? And you think we can go back to normal even after you've cheated? Then, Donald looked at me with teary eyes.
Hey, do I really have to sign this? I think we can still make it work.
I have no intention of making it work. If you don't want to sign, I will proceed with the lawyer as it is. Then Donald, as if resigned, signed the divorce papers. I took the signed divorce papers from Donald and faced him. I'll tell you one last thing. That woman you cheated on me with while claiming to be on a business trip, she's something else.
What do you mean, something else? Don't speak ill of her.
Donald shouted back at me, his hair disheveled. Don't shout. It seems she wasn't only seeing you. Based on the surveillance camera footage, she appears with 2 or 3 different men. You're just one of her many flings.
That's impossible. She wouldn't do that.
Believe it or not, that's up to you, but I think it's scary not to see reality. I had nothing more to tell Donald. I went to submit the signed divorce papers. I could hear Donald shouting something in the background, but I didn't stop. Ultimately, I divorced Donald. The lawyer mother-in-law had hired helped me with the divorce and compensation claim without any problems. Donald kept complaining until the very end, but living with someone who changes after marriage and only thinks about themselves was more painful. How could he think we could still make it work, even after cheating on me? I was curious and asked Donald about it once. Then he gave me an unexpected answer.
No, I thought we were connected at the soul. That no matter what happens, we wouldn't separate. You understand, right? This feeling?
What are you saying all of a sudden? Connected at the soul? I can't understand your thinking.
Well, someone as harmonious with nature as me can understand the voice of the soul.
I wasn't asking about that. If you can't betray someone you're supposedly connected with so easily, I can't deal with that. In the end, Donald was the most important person to himself. He was a selfish man who only cared about himself, and realizing that was perhaps the only good thing. All I was left with was the company mother-in-law had entrusted to me. I decided to protect and grow the company as a way to repay her kindness. Now I'm just focusing on work. Our new products are a big hit, and the company is getting more media attention, increasing our sales. I'm happy to have come this far with the support of many fans, but the pressure is stronger than the happiness. I always feel like I need to work harder. As president, I'm managing to keep the company going. The divorce was bitter, but I'll take it as a lesson in life. Donald was fired for his misconduct and causing harm to the company, so he's no longer relevant to me. However, unexpectedly, he appeared before me again. It happened when I visited a grocery store to discuss our new product. While talking with an employee, I heard a familiar voice. There was Donald, looking unchanged from before, being scolded by a younger employee while stocking shelves. When he noticed me, he looked at me as if he had seen a savior and came over.
I knew I would see you again.
What's this all of a sudden? Shouldn't you get back to work?
Don't they need me for the work to get done? If you say you want me back, I'll come back.
They need you for the work to get done? Could he really believe such a thing? How highly does he think of his own work capabilities? I almost couldn't stop myself from laughing at the thought, but I knew I couldn't laugh in this situation. It's somewhat impressive that you still believe you can return to the company without any doubt, I replied with a smile. Who would think of calling back someone who betrayed their spouse, cheated, and couldn't even follow the company's rules?
No, that's because we were married. And you're the president, right? You can make it happen with your authority. No one would oppose you in such a small company.
Donald said this with a crude laugh. Former President Lisa was a very important person to me. Do you really think you can return after insulting someone and a company so dear to me?
No, this is just a joke, sort of.
There's nothing more to discuss. Donald's bad habits were still the same. When he senses a bad situation, he tries to escape by claiming it was just a joke. Does he think everything is forgiven if he says it's a joke? Even if it's a joke, not being able to distinguish between what's acceptable to say and what's not, I felt sorry for him. Still like that as an adult. Or perhaps there's something about him that makes people feel that way. I quickly finished my work and went home. By the way, the female employee Donald cheated with got involved with another married man and ended up in legal trouble. I couldn't see through her, but in the end, it seems like I was just swayed by her games. I thought that the nature of envying others' possessions never changes, and before I knew it, she had resigned. When I received her resignation notice, I wasn't surprised at all and didn't feel anything. Now she's struggling in her daily life, being sued for compensation by the married man's spouse. Honestly, I learned for the first time that people who stray away from the right path will fail without anyone having to intervene. I'm still striving every day to protect the company left by the former president. There are times when work doesn't go as planned, or the reputation doesn't improve as hoped, but I believe I'm managing somehow. My mother, who had been hospitalized for a long time, is finally about to be discharged, and I'm looking forward to that day. The trip I couldn't take with my mother that day. Once she's discharged and her condition stabilizes, I plan to enjoy a leisurely trip, just mother and daughter.